Change is all around us. So, how do you manage the changes that happen year round? Welcome to another episode of Change Itself, hosted by Eric Demers and Gus Miner. This show is brought to you by Sofvie and Technica Mining and is produced by Crownsmen Partners. Here are your hosts, Eric and Gus.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Change Itself. We're here with episode 6. You got Eric Demers here and myself, Gus Miner. Today, we've got a really excellent discussion point that we're going to be exploring with our guest, Stephan from Cambrian College, R&D department. And, it's all about the workforce of the future. So, stay tuned. We've got lots of great content for you, and I hope you'll enjoy. Eric, since our last show, how's things been?
Very good. Yourself?
Other than the constant changing weather or the constantly getting colder weather, everything has been good. We've been rushing to try to make sure that we beat the first snowfall, while at the same time not rushing too much so that we don't miss anything. But that's what it's been for us lately.
I think for me, things have kind of maybe settled down in the change department, getting back into a routine in life. So it's good. So who we got today?
Well, today we got Stephan Gravel. Steve, welcome aboard. Thanks a lot for joining us today.
Yeah, real pumped to be here. Thanks for having me on, guys. I must remember this whole time that this is a video podcast, so I don't touch my face or anything like that.
Yeah, maybe if you don't mind, Steve, maybe just give us a quick minute here about what your role is at Cambrian and what you're up to.
Sure. Yeah. No, I'm excited. I rejoined the Cambrian team a couple of years ago to lead their new Technology Access Center. And technology, just a quick word about that. Technology Access Centers are federally funded research hubs at colleges across Canada. There's 60 of them. They're typically a reflection of the communities from which they spring. So you could imagine there's some that focused on oil sands research in the prairies. There's some that focus on fisheries and oceanography on the coasts. We're in Sudbury, so we chose for our topic to be mining. It wasn't a huge surprise to pick mining, but what we wanted to do was choose something a bit more specific, and that's smart mining. And the focus that we have as sort of what we live every day is to facilitate the adoption of new technologies in the sector. So I'm the manager of the Center for Smart Mining, which is Cambrian's Technology Access Center.
Oh, very good. Thanks for that synopsis there, Steve. We've had so many conversations and it molded in so many different ways over the past few years. I wanted to make sure it came directly from you.
Yeah, and then do please call me Steve, because whenever I hear Steve and I look like, where's my mom and dad? Are they giving me heck for something? So Steve would be fine.
It's like when somebody picks up the phone and calls me Gislain. Same thing. I'm like, oh boy, that's what's one from the household.
Yeah, for sure.
Sorry to interrupt, guys. What is SMART an acronym for something?
No, it's not. What we wanted to do is, like smart home and smart technology is really about connected technology, as we move forward. And one of the things that's a big focus of the center is to really try and take away barriers to adoption of new technologies. And that's sort of where the sort of name came from. The way we do that is sort of in two ways. We look at two big barriers. One is obviously technical. You guys know that there's a lot of technical integration challenges with new technologies that come into mining. And the other is people. When you try and adopt new technology, there's inherently a skills gap that's created whenever you bring that new thing in. So the Center for Smart Mining is looking at smart ways of dealing with those two barriers.
Perfect. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Right on. On that concept, we've been dealing with quite a bit of that stuff, between Eric and I with different projects that we've been involved in, and also co-chairing and other companies and other work groups. And, something that's come up as a conversation quite a bit is, it seems like we went for a few years where we were talking about, talent acquisition, but also talent retention. And now, I think there's been a lot of work done by industry and several industries to find ways to increase retention, even though it's almost counterintuitive, because it's not a thing anymore to work somewhere for 30 years, right? So you're already at a deficiency there, trying to get somebody long term when it's just no longer the mold. But we talk about, we make a lot of efforts as a company to keep that funnel filled for sales and marketing, and trying to keep production moving forward. But a lot of times, we have to put in double the effort to keep the HR funnel full, so to speak, right? So we have that constant pipeline of talent coming in. And what I realized recently, and that's why I thought we'd have a great conversation, is that although all this change is happening in industry, there's an enormous amount of change happening in the educational sector to even satisfy, to satisfy that demand and to prepare people to go through those motions. So maybe Stephen, if you can share a little bit more on that topic to see, how are you guys been transitioning things with your students to not only find them a suitable home, but to get them geared up for what's coming?
Yeah, and I mean, gosh, how long do you have, right? Because that's sort of the name of the game right now. Even before the pandemic, we're trying to look at ways of training the workforce of the future. First, I'll pick up on something you said about attraction and retention. It's one thing that we deal with all the time, and when we deal with students that come through the Applied Research and Center for Smart Mining, it's not enough anymore for like my generation and the generation before me. It was enough that it was a solid, good paying job. Now we're seeing this new layer of sort of demand coming from the workforce, where it also has to be interesting. It has to be cool. It has to be high tech. It's all those things now that when a graduate is looking for a job, there's more check boxes than there ever was, right? They care about equity, diversity, inclusion. So like there's all of these things that employers are having to deal with now. And then the ones the companies we work with are always saying, maybe we don't have to start at 7:30 in the morning. Maybe it's enough that we work from 9 to 5 or 10 to 6. Maybe it's the employer that needs to change rather than the graduate trying to fit into a mold, right? And I think that's just such an interesting concept. Is that there's going to be more prospective employees than there are places to work. So who has to change, right? So in the end, I assume it's going to be a bit of both. You still want your people to be in it early in the morning to get at her and start the grind. But there's all kinds of interesting things that are happening as a result of that. Now at the college, one thing, so colleges are, I think, incipiently reactive to industry trends, and we need to constantly stay ahead of the curve. And we do a good and bad job of that. We have lead times on being able to change curriculum and things of that nature. But I think what we've been trying to do over the last few years is really stress flexibility. So flexibility in how you take the learning, whether that's a hybrid online and in-person model, but also when can you take it? I think gone are the days where you have to wait till next September to take a course. We're talking about multiple intakes, that sort of thing that sort of caters more to being there and available for students when we need them. And that's for new students coming out of high school, but also for students that are looking to be retrained. If you employ someone that's going back to be retrained, you don't want to say, as a business, I need to wait a year before they can take that training again. You want it to be the next 3 months, right? And that's what we're increasingly going towards to facilitate that. One thing that's obviously been top of mind is online learning and online training because of the pandemic. As we switch to virtual, we really have to still, one of the main benefits of college training is the hands-on piece. And I think we've been coming up with a number of sort of interesting ways to deal with that. But I'm a bit of a traditionalist, and maybe we can get into it. I don't think there is a big replacement for hands-on learning or specific real use case learning. So maybe we could talk a bit more about that.
Yeah, for sure. I think I can jump in on that because I've been in the world of looking at virtual reality for training and the hands-on and more of the process approach. I think there is maybe not a clear-cut substitute at this point, but there is definitely a future that I'm seeing where some of that hands-on training will be in in a virtual environment where you're actually getting to touch and feel and practice the process. Up to now, it is very costly and very time consuming to get that environment put together, but I think over time that will certainly solve itself. I had a question for you. So in regards to the smart mining and even the work that Cambrian's doing. So one of the challenges I'm sure you guys face is that you're preparing people for the workforce today. But the future where we go, I think we all see it where you got some automation and it's automated. And to go back to your concept around smart mining or smart industry, if you will, where everything's connected to the internet. And I can visualize that future. What kind of training, what is like the real life like today? What is a student learning and getting exposed to so that they have the right, maybe not the right building blocks, but there's building blocks in place to be able to like be successful today and to be ready for that future?
Yeah, it's interesting, and that's a great question, Eric, because it's often discipline dependent as well. Some disciplines are more impacted by digital technologies than others, but eventually, to your point, they're all going to be. So I think it's incumbent upon the college. I'll speak about post-secondary programming first, and then I'll tell you why I think we have the solution at the Center for Smart Mining. But increasingly, we're seeing digital technologies being integrated into classroom subjects. One that I think is really, really going to be impacted by that shift is the heavy duty equipment program. So these vehicles, as we are getting into, tier 4 and beyond vehicles, as well as, the advent of battery electric vehicles, are all connected vehicles from the beginning now, right? So you can do diagnostics using a laptop right at the operating face on a piece of equipment. There are all kinds of data analytics that are really interesting to tell you about the operation of that equipment. You can do predictive analytics on predictive and preventative maintenance now more than ever. But at the end of the day, when you look at the curriculum, we're still learning about hydraulics and diesel engines and things of that nature. So what we've had to do is start to really look at our courses and say, does this match the reality when they enter the field? And in some cases, where there are cases where we can inject technology, that's where we're having to do that. And we're doing that with our partners that support the program on the program advisory committees. The cool thing about colleges is that we have something called program advisory committees, and that's a group of industry professionals that sit and advise on curriculum. So we're taking our cues sort of from day one, from the operations of these companies, and saying, how can we better serve them and ultimately better serve the students that take our courses. So it's going to be an interesting future because I think the adage I heard was they're going to be less and less taking their toolboxes with them, but more and more taking their laptops with them. And I think that's going to be the case on all of these sort of traditional legacy trades. Obviously, electrical is one that's transformed incredibly. You're an electrician, but you're also an IoT expert now. So that's all coming into the classrooms. Programming of PLCs, SCADA systems, that's all things that they're learning now that they wouldn't have before. If you take a look at our trades area, 10, 15 years ago, there was no PLC lab. Now we have one of the most state-of-the-art PLC labs in the province because of that reason, Eric. That's just only going to continue to accelerate, and we have to adopt technology at the same pace as industry largely, right? We're seeing this in battery electric vehicles, and I think that's where we're also seeing this in like advanced data analytics, underground communication systems, those areas where the college, can't be changing their post-secondary curriculum within a year, but the trends in the industry are impacting industry today, right? So what the Center for Smart Mining is able to do, and this is a bit of a shameless plug of the kinds of things we do here, but hopefully you'll indulge me. We're able to build short-term, quick-hitting technology upskilling programs for people that are already in industry. So the one that I always like to talk about that's running now is our battery electric vehicle maintenance course. Mining companies have really good heavy-duty equipment mechanics working for them. There is a degree of uncertainty and lack of familiarity when it comes to operating and maintaining electric equipment, because there's just a degree of difference that needs to be dealt with. So what we've done is we've come up with a 60-hour technology upskilling course where those in-service technicians can come to Cambrian and get hands-on learning to be able to be more familiar with that equipment and be able to operate and maintain it safely. So the reason why we did that is it wasn't like Steve Gravel's great idea. It's because industry's saying, look, we got 300 or 400 diesel mechanics. We're going to be buying 300 pieces of equipment in the next 5 years. There's a skills gap. So can you help us out? And that's what we hope to be able to provide that is more nimble than what we're doing in the classroom. Classroom will pick that up by next September. Some of that curriculum is going to actually be in the heavy duty equipment program so that the new ones we're making have that skill set. But we also need to deal with the majority of people that are already in industry that need that technology upskilling.
No, I appreciate that.
I was kind of droning on a bit there, so hopefully that gave you a bit of a picture.
No, I like it because that's where I was thinking was like there's like the students that are coming, but then there's the current workforce that, you know, if they haven't had those foundation blocks, like where do they go get that, and where do employers go to be able to upskill their employees? So I thought it was awesome. One of the things we've been talking with Cambrian about is the business data analytics. So for somebody like myself that has no background, and I'm really starting to learn about this concept of like gathering data on different platforms to get it, whether it's from equipment through either the OEMs, you know, onboard computers, or something like maybe a technology we talk about later would be the Symboticware or the Symbot, where all those things kind of, there's streams of data that we're collecting, but somebody like me that doesn't have much of a data background, it's cool, we have it. What do I do with it? Is there anything coming down that would help someone like me?
You know what, Eric, we didn't do a pre-interview on this topic, but I'm so glad you bring that up because I do have a solution that we're working on right now. And I should stress to your listeners, we didn't pre-plan this. I'm just so glad you brought that up because we've noticed the same trend. So over the last 5 years, mines have been really good at buying devices that collect data, that liberate data from otherwise dumb assets, right? Whether it's a slurry pump that now gives me vibration analysis, or if it's a piece of equipment that's now telling me oil pressure on a regular basis. So that's been a really rapid change that we're seeing in mining. What I think you're identifying is, now what the hell do we do with the data? And how do we get business insights and actionable decisions out of that data? So one of the things we're working on with, I was going to say the company, but it's not public yet. One of the things we're working on with a major mining end user is how do we create an upskilling program for people that are already in the mining industry. And this can be any industry, but we're starting with the mining industry because that's our bread and butter. And the name of the course is notionally called Data Analytics for Miners. And that's really doing that sort of level setting so that when we're dealing with operational people that have an interaction with data on a daily basis, are they getting the full extent of the actual productivity from that data? So it's really going back to data science fundamentals. We stop short of machine learning, of course, because this is like sort of a upskilling course. Yep. But it's really taking some of those things that you might see in the post-secondary course and breaking it down to specific personas. So when you look like, what will a geologist need to know about data analytics? What will a maintenance person need to know about data analytics? And it's really breaking them into those specific job categories and really sort of looking at what we can glean from that and what we can train from that in a short, impactful training offering. So it's coming down the pipe. It should be, I'm going to say optimistically, February, that we start offering that as an offering at the Center for Smart Mining.
Well, that's really exciting. Maybe you can send me a link when that does come to be. It's easy.
We're looking for beta testers too, Eric. So I think if you want to be one of the early guinea pigs,
you might have found yourself a guinea pig.
Yeah.
It's easy to get intoxicated by the idea of these solutions and what they offer and AI and all this stuff. And what I've come to realize is we will get there, and there's a journey to get there. And so I could just sit back and wait for it, or I can, there's valuable info data there that I should be able to do something with. I just don't have the necessary tools to go do it.
Every worker deserves to go home safely at the end of the day. Book a demo with Sofvie to discover how their groundbreaking EHS management software empowers workers to proactively avoid hazards and how organizations like yours can cultivate a stronger work culture. Visit them at sofvie.com to learn more. Technica Mining is a premier underground mining and construction contractor. They stand for delivering quality project work on time and on budget through innovative thinking. Their excellent safety record, experienced workforce, and large equipment fleet will guarantee the timely completion of all your project needs. Trusted by the world's leading mining companies, Technica Mining has over 20 years of experience in mine construction, development, and production. Contact Technica Mining to take your next mining project to the next level. Visit them at technicamining.com to learn more. Change Itself is produced by Crownsmen, the voice of industry. Check out more, including The Crownsmen Show, Mining Now, Crownsmen Energy, and Crownsmen Ag at crownsmen.com.
And what's nice, Steve, with your solution that you're proposing is that it further accelerates bridging that gap between the expertise that know what to do with the data and are trying to communicate with stakeholders about it. And then the stakeholders being at the other end going, we don't deal with data. What are you talking about? Right.
Yeah.
So bridging that gap in not only just like a base language or a base understanding, it's almost like sending somebody that's been speaking English their whole life and all of a sudden they're communicating in French. Well, there's going to be a gap there until you get to that base thing. And that's what I find with the data side is we're in that phase now where not only the workforce of the future have to come in knowing that they have to be able to speak in layman's terms, but the current workforce to come in and upskill to be able to absorb that information coming in, right?
Yeah.
I hear so when you guys were talking, or Steve, when you were talking about it, now Gus just now, I think that whole concept around looking at data is something that's applicable to different, whether it's a trade or a skill or an area or department or whatever, because you're all looking at your data. You already know the functions and how things are supposed to be. Like if I think from a mechanics side, you're talking about hydraulics, maybe they're monitoring pressures and they understand the mechanics behind it, but now they've got it in a database where it's just a little more powerful and they can actually make different use of it and get a better understanding and better refine their prediction models and whatnot. I think it's absolutely exciting.
Yeah, and I mean, as a sales guy from way back, I just think that it's going to do a lot for uptake in the industry, because what we're trying to do is essentially inform the buyer too, right? So, Gus, you alluded to this a bit, but it's hard to talk about the benefits of a data product if you're the data product developer, like Sofvie might be, when you have a public that doesn't understand to the full extent the value, right? So we're trying to break down that key barrier to adoption that in this case is skills and familiarity. But I think it's going to actually do a lot for penetration from a lot of different data companies that might already have uptake in other sectors into this specific sector. So that's what I'm excited about, because it means that mining becomes a more and more high-tech sector, which it already is. But and then that in turn drives a whole bunch of recruitment opportunities to get students that are graduating from the Waterloo area or U of T, to come and work on a data analytics product, for the mining sector. It has to, like I said at the beginning, it has to be interesting. And I think there's nothing as interesting as advanced data analytics right now.
Yeah. Now, when it comes down to, you spoke a lot about it, Steve, with the industry partners and industry sector. So whenever we discuss about the workforce of the future and even upskilling the current workforce, because a lot of times when we talk about automation and optimizations, we're not eliminating you as a person. We're eliminating the requirement of the specific role you're serving. So then it's, let's just train you up to offer your skill set with the background knowledge that you have into a different role. And what I find that's been interesting is that, especially on the electric, or as far as the electricians and mechanics, they've been going through a transition in the past few years that I went through on the IT side over the past 25 years as well, where when I started with servicing, I would have a toolbox and a bunch of manuals, and I would have my testers to make sure that all the capacitors were good. And then within a couple of years, I was walking around with a CD-ROM case, right? And then there was no more tools because if it didn't work, you just replaced it. And it was just software upgrades to all of a sudden a USB stick, to all of a sudden everything is on site. And guess what? I don't even go there anymore. We just do it online, right? So I've been seeing the electricians and mechanics going down the same path that the service sector did for the technology side. They're going down the same road, and we're having the same conversations. Really cool. So
yeah, and I think that just to pick up on that, Gus, I don't think, as a son of a heavy duty equipment mechanic, I don't think that job gets eliminated in the workplace of the future, because there's so much context in that brain that is so critical to actually making the enabling technologies work effectively at the operation. So you're dead on. It's about upskilling that person to carry the CD-ROM case instead of the tool bag, to use it as a metaphor, right? I think that's what's going to happen. I don't think we're looking at net job elimination. It's job changing, and it's really, making sure that change isn't so disruptive that the existing workforce can't keep up. And that's what we're talking about: is how do we make this bite-sized? How do we make it? We always go back to making it appropriate, relevant, and scalable, right? So that this isn't the last course you take on BEVs, it's the first course you take.
it's an installment.
That's exactly right. And then as that technology inevitably evolves, you have the foundation to evolve with it. And that's what we're looking at when we talk about upskilling.
So is that what we're looking at in the future, Stephen? Is instead of going in for a 3-year course, you would do a few segments of 1-year courses, or a few segments of 6-month courses over a course of 6 years or 10 years. And in this way, you get into the workplace quicker, and you have a continuous development plan alongside of the development plan of the employer. Is that what the future looks like to you, Steve?
Yeah, I think so. So you even see it in the courses we're starting to offer at Cambrian, right? They're getting shorter. There aren't these 4-year technology degrees anymore. A lot of them are 1 and 2 years specializations that have very focus on skills and context, right? So I've been trying to get the college to call us Canada's mining college, and it's because we're training largely for one sector, right? I don't think they have gone with that yet, but that's something I want to start to think about. How can we be of service to the mining sector for the next 50 years? And I think the way we do that is by making things more flexible and bite-sized, the way you're talking about. I think that is where the future will be, because I think if you come out of high school, there will be the need for a 1 or 2 year program to situate the context, meaning to have these sort of core theory instilled in that individual. But I think after that, we're talking about 60-hour courses. We're talking about, there's the kinds of thing that we all love, right? Stuff on Coursera, stuff on LinkedIn Learning, right? Those kinds of things are, I think, where the future is going to go. The thing that we can't forget is the hands-on context, because when we talk about, how we're doing work integrated learning at the college, that means the student actually seeing firsthand, something that's actually meaningful to the industry. Mm-hmm. So traditionally that's through co-op placement, right? Where a student has actually gone, into a workforce and works alongside their peers, and that's some of the best learning they'll get at the college. But it's also through things like what we're doing at the Center for Smart Mining, like applied research, actually working on a piece of development with an industry partner. And the reason why that is, you can teach case studies from a book, but when something actually matters to whether or not a company gets a contract with an end user, and the student has that experience, like the bit of anxiety around, actually working in a real business, I think there's nothing like that, right? So you have to be able to simulate that kind of thing. We get this PO or we don't make payroll next week is something they should be hearing about earlier in their career than they are, because then that shows the gravity of what it means to actually work in that industry. And I think that kind of simulation can't be done, just by looking at case studies in a book, right?
You bring up a good topic here with that, as well as because these programs are getting shorter and students are being exposed to the workplace sooner. Like I recently delivered a a session, actually at Cambrian, with a program, and they were expecting to hear all kinds of things from industry, and then all kinds of insights of what's going on. And what the conversation was about was integrity.
Yeah.
And it was just about because what I find that's happening is student roles, from what I've been exposed to over the course of my career, student roles have been filled by kind of like the make work projects. And, you bring students in and they're doing kind of like hodgepodge kind of make work stuff, cutting the grass, doing whatever. There's no real agenda to why they're there other than the fact that they're getting exposed. So they're being exposed to the industry, but not really, because they're not doing any value add work. So now with these programs where we're able to inject people directly into, inject students directly into value add work, well, now they're not just coming in for a glimpse of things, they're in the heat of things right away. And then, that's what led the conversation about integrity, about saying like, hey, like we're going to be depending on these KPIs from you, even though they're not going to be less aggressive than a full-time employee. You're still in the mix, and that's where the value comes in. And when students leave the workplace from their co-op or their placement or their short-term commitment, it's actually something valuable they can put on their resume, which resonates really well for them in their career, and they've left an impact. So something that I talk about with our team all the time is that the biggest compliment that we can have when students leave, when students leave our place of work, is that they leave a huge void and a huge hole where you're like, holy moly, this student was offering so much value. Now we have to find a way to replace or hire that student full time, because we're not even sure anymore how we operated without that. Have you been able to see that trend kind of forming with your industry partners? And the second part of that question is, how important is industry partners for the workforce of the future?
Yeah, I mean, I'll speak specifically what we do at the center with regards to applied research. So just a quick word on that. Applied research is essentially us taking a team of students, faculty, and researchers, and partnering with a client, like an industry partner, to do a piece of R&D or development. So within that context, it's some of the most real hands-on training you can get at the college. And I think I want to just echo with what you're saying. So when we have our biweekly updates on that, it's typically the student that's responsible for giving the update to the client. And we do that on purpose, because exactly what you're saying, this is like into the fire, right? It's still in a safe place because we have a lot of guardrails, set up for the students to be able to fail and things like that. And they are employed by the college and not the industry partner. And we have a lot of mentorship around them. But at the end of the day, what we have to show them is you need to become a productive member of that team whenever you leave here within 6 to 8 months, because that's what industry's used to, being saddled with. I need to get them up to date. I need to get them part of the organizational culture within that period of time so that they become a productive employee. What I think we do through the applied research effort and them working on these projects is try and cut down that green time, right? So they will have already experienced, the corporate culture of the client. They'll experience deadlines, which is something that I can't stress enough. We need more of that in our students' lives, is deadlines that matter, that have teeth, that are the difference between employment or not employment, right? So those kinds of things are some of the things that we build into how we work. And if we're doing our job right, when the project's over and we have that deliverable done, there should be a void. You should want to do this more. And for that reason, most of the students that come through the Center for Smart Mining, and I would say like high 90%, get hired by either the client they're working with or a client that sees that on their resume and says, that's the person I want. They've actually been out there in the trenches with our guys before and know what it's like to do that. So it's things like that, the work integrated learning, that I think are going to make it easier for companies to find and hire talent, and good talent that's going to be with them for a number of years.
I think you guys are on the right track, because even through work with recently with NORCAT and the program we started at Technical called TACT, where it was a Technical Academy for Career Development, where we take, it's a scholarship of people graduating the Common Core program, getting another like 2 weeks of experiential learning. Like once they've got their like quote JQs here on like the license to learn, which is their license to go get experience. So once they start doing that for an extra 2 weeks, the confidence they have and the demeanor they have in the workplace is so much different than like just with the bare necessities, if you will. That real world kind of experience really makes a difference.
Yeah. And honestly, Eric, that's one of our biggest, so one of the things that companies come to us for is that technical support on actually doing like a prototype or a proof of concept or getting that applied R&D done. But a close second, sometimes first place in the prioritization list is I get to test drive the most skilled students at Cambrian College in a low risk way, where they're working on my technology and they're getting, acclimated to this sector. That's one of the biggest things that we try and do, right? And I mean, we're doing 30, 40 students a year. We need to do more than that. But those 30, 40 students have already had a finishing school of sorts, where now they're some of the most desirable students on the market. And we only see that scaling. I mean, we have 4,100 full-time students. I'd love to do an applied research project with every one of those students every year. And that's where we want to get to, is being able to be really a provider of choice for talent in the high-tech sector, in the mining sector. And that's where we're sort of going to.
That's exciting. Gus,
Yeah.
I think about the time in the episode where we talk about a technology or an emerging technology or something we've come across. I alluded to it a little bit earlier. I think I'd like to, talk about the concept that I saw, where it was around like different like platforms, and platforms being whether it's a device or a way of gathering data that will someday, feed data, big data and data analytics and AI and that kind of stuff. But the one interesting one that I had a meeting with in the last week was Symboticware and the Symbot. And my mind went right to like the future of like being able to automate equipment and operating in a drift and doing all these things. But like the reality is we've got to start somewhere, and just implementing a device that allows you to, whatever the manufacturer is, kind of spit out apples to apples and give you something you can work with is pretty exciting. I don't know if you, what are you guys thinking there?
Well, I'm ready to be an evangelist for Symboticware because they're a client of ours. We do work with them. But I think it's actually a really interesting time for Symboticware, because their product offering is coming at a time where underground communications infrastructure is starting to get better.
Yeah.
I think the real-time part of what Symboticware is offering for like machine health monitoring and telemetry, as that becomes closer and closer to mission critical with like underground LTE or Wi-Fi that is reliable and available en masse, I think is going to be a really big gateway technology for companies like Symboticware. And you're dead on though. Like, I think what I said before is true for Symboticware too. We really need to train the decision makers that are ingesting the Symboticware data so that they can get the full potential out of what it is as a solution. Because I think once you're speaking a machine language to a machine operating, that's a two-way street, right? So you can get a lot of information. You can also make a lot of interesting tuning changes going the other way. So I think it's a cool gateway technology, and it's now happening at a time where I think the industry is ready to take a bite out of it.
And I used Symbot because I happened to be in conversation with them. I don't know what other providers offer the same type of thing, but it's like it's that platform thing. And then like just talking with Gus, like for us, Sofvie's also that in a way where we're collecting human information, like human behavior data, and you can help with performance. Like, and so even with the Symbotic, whether it's, equipment data or human data, you can then start to look at it from different, factors, whether it's behavior, like I'd like to analyze my own performance on how do I get better. I'm wearing a Garmin watch, like that's giving me data that it's actionable right now. I got to do a little bit of digging, deciphering on my own, but the future is those possibilities is endless. But starting to collect some of that data and information to be able to do something with it is one of those like really key things that came across.
Well, and I think so it's really important that the communication infrastructure is starting to get there. The other thing is, and Gus, I don't know if you have an opinion on this as an IT person, but up until 5 years ago, mines never wanted to even talk about cloud computing or storing anything on the cloud. Now we're starting to see that reluctance go away. Before it was like, well, we need everything on site on metal. We need it on bare metal servers. That's what we need. But there is such an opportunity, like it's another gateway technology for things like Symbotic, where you can have that data available to anyone who needs to use it via the cloud. And I think that's going to be another one that's going to be really meaningful for companies like Symboticware.
Well, there's two things, right? So it's being introduced like almost like a sandwich, because one, the infrastructure is there to support it, so there's no more excuse, right? The other thing is that service providers, it's no longer financially viable to have these bare metals systems. You know what I mean? Because the technology sector is struggling for people just as like anybody else. So if we have to be hands on the ground or boots on the ground with everything we do, how the heck do we scale and how do we make this available and affordable for the client? So it's like, no, it's the cloud. We're essentially manage this, it's in the cloud. And so by having that nudge from this way and then the availability from this way, we're finding ourselves in a really happy medium there, which is exciting. And I think, to that point as well, when we were talking about, different emerging technologies and things like that, and something that came in, and then Eric mentioned it as almost like a popcorn moment, is no different than any new home being built today has to have the wiring ready to go and the positioning ready to go for an electric vehicle. Why? You may not have an electric vehicle today. You may not have it in 2 years, but somewhere down the lifeline of that home, there will be an electric vehicle there. Therefore, get it ready. And it's not a huge infrastructure upgrade to plug in your car. And it's kind of like how we see data as well. Is, yes, we know that it's sexy to talk about analytics today, but guess what? You need data to get there. So put in the pieces that's going to start generating data. And then your next project can be about amalgamating that data and then converging and then gaining value from the analytics. Because we find a lot of times where, it doesn't matter if it's Symbot, Sofvie, or anything else, you put it in, okay, we're live, cool, where's the analytics? Well, hold on a sec. It's good that you're thinking there, but your mind can't be on the finish line. Like if you're racing a marathon and all you think about was, well, when am I going to get to the finish line? That's going to be the longest race of your life. Whereas if you put your checkpoints a little bit sooner and a little bit more realistic, one, it's a lot easier on your change management process because you're not tying directly huge impactful KPIs to your project to validate its existence. And at the same time, you can then create a separate project for data digestion, right? So that was a really good one. And Eric brought that up with, to me earlier this week, and it sunk in for a few days. And I think that's where both the education of the current workforce and the education of the new workforce coming in is really going to start driving that point across, is whether you're resistant or not, data is going to be where things are going to be in a very short form. No different than it was all hardware for the longest time in the PC, in the computer field. And now it's, okay, fine, your hardware breaks, just replace it. The hardware is no longer the barrier. It's the software and the interpretation that's the barrier, right? So
yeah, it's funny how everyone's fine with having a dryer plug now, but 40 years ago, 50 years ago, there wasn't a dryer plug in every home, but now that's just commonplace when you're building a house. I think that'll be the car charger, of the future, of the immediate future is, they're all going to be, every house has those car chargers. I think the other important thing, like as you talk about those manageable stage gates for change management, one thing that when we're building a scope is you actually have to show value at each of those stage gates too, right? It's not just like looking at the finish line. It's like, as you roll out each of those different checkpoints, there is a handoff of value that is usable today, rather than like waiting for all the value at the end, which is sort of a non-starter with a lot of clients.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, right on. I mean, for the sake of time, I think we can easily talk about this for a long time. And I knew it was going to be a very interesting topic today, with how we generate the workforce of the future, but also prime the workplace of the future to take on that talent. And I appreciate your time, Stephen, for joining us on this conversation, and all the all the efforts that are happening behind the scenes with Cambrian. Behind and in front of, because we're exposed to it quite a bit, being in the sector.
Mhm.
It was a great conversation. Eric, episode six in the books, and it was another fantastic conversation today.
Right on. Thanks a lot, Steve. Thanks, Gus. Really appreciate it.
Sure. If I could do one more shameless thing, my colleague and friend Mike Camuto and I have a podcast where we highlight some of the companies we work with, and it's called The Unlikely Innovators, and it's available on Spotify and Apple if you ever have a chance. And now that we're starting to drive more into work, people have a bit more time on their commutes. But and I would love to have both or one of you on in the near future so that we can ask you questions about the fun things you guys get to do all the time. So definitely want to do that in the future too.
Right on. Look forward to it.
Yeah,
Awesome.
thanks a lot. For everybody, we'll have Stephen's information in the description of this video. So please don't forget to click like and subscribe and keep following along. We appreciate everybody's viewership to date, and we keep looking forward to the new content. And yeah, we'll have Steve's LinkedIn information. Don't be afraid to reach out to him and see what's up. And then let's get that the workplace of the future hopping.